welcome to Kerry's Cards. Well, today we're going to look at making two cards from one piece of red A4 card, and I'm going to make it slightly romantic themed using stamp sets from the current mini catalogue January to June 2022. So this one, and we are going to use some of the Sweet Talk papers, which you can find on page 9, and also the Nuts and Bolts stamp set that you can find on page 13. As always, I'm going to pop the the instructions and the measurements up here for you. So we're going to go through this in real time and hopefully not make any mistakes, but if I do, we'll try and correct them as we go. We're going to put this little one aside at the moment, so this bit is the offcut from the bottom of the piece of A4 card you can see there, but it'll become more self-explanatory as we go on. You will need some scissors and a bone folder. If you have a die cut machine, then we're going to be using some of the stitch dies here for a lot of the shapes in today's session, but on below I've given instructions for the sizes. If you don't have these, you can cut out plain pieces of paper. So I've given you the dimensions in the actual information below. So let's get started. You will also need some a piece of white card, some scraps of red, white and black, some DSP, so these are some scrap bits that I've not completely used, and a piece of red. So we'll first start with getting our base sorted. Move those out of the way, and we need for the base, we need a piece of 8" by 8", and we're going to score that at 4" to make the actual base of the card. So cut that down there, and we need to keep this piece because this piece is what we're going to use to make the smaller card. So I'm just going to pop that to one side for later. And then we need to score. And with my trimmer, obviously I've got the scoring blade on. If I haven't, you could use a normal score tool. And as with all cards, in a minute we'll bone fold that to make sure it stays in place. At the same time now, I'm also going to cut my inside of the card, and that measurement needs to be, the white inside is 3 3/4 by 7 3/4. So if I go this way, I can fit at least 2 more out of this piece of card if I need it, by 7 3/4. Oh. Pop that to one side. So that's my inside piece cut. I also need some black card cut at 3 3/4 by 2 1/2. So I'm going to go this way, 3 3/4 by 2 1/2. I'm going to keep this little bit here because if you remember on the back of the card here, what we've done is actually printed it and stamped the image and cut it out and mounted it. So this is what our scrap piece that we need for later. And then in terms of designer series paper, I've gone for the pink hearts one here. So I want a strip that's 6" by 2". So I'm going this way because I want my hearts that way across page. I don't want them looking that way. It would work if you went that way, but so be mindful of the pattern on your paper depending on which way you want your images to be. So I want 2". Pop that to one side. So that's my 6" by 2". Now my card is 4" wide, so I'm going to cut a strip off here that's 4". So that's my bit for the front. Now on the inside of the card that I didn't show you is I've actually brought some of the pattern inside as well. So I'm taking this little piece that's left over, and I'm just going to cut this one. So corner to corner matched up on the cutting line, and cut 2 little triangles out. So that's going to be for the inside of my card later. So again, let's pop that over there. So I'm now going to bring on the my mini cutting machine and my plates, because I want to cut the white layer to stamp my image on. So that bit's not big enough. So I'm just going to cut myself a piece of cardstock from the white. I don't like waste, so I tend to just sort of line it up a little bit and then hopefully let's move that out of the way. Oh, too wide, see? Let's go this way then. Just make that a little bit thinner. When it comes to cutting the plates through, pushing the plates through, if you're finding you're having a little bit of trouble because they're so lined up, I tend to move one of them back slightly and it helps it go through the machine better. But I have to stand up and hold it and press it down. There's our first piece. I also need, whilst I'm here, I'm going to cut my white piece that I need for the smaller card later behind, for the squirrel one. I've made it one slightly underneath, one slightly underneath. That sounds daft, but that will help it go through. I really have twisted my working space now, haven't I? I'm going to pop that to one side for later. The next thing I needed was a small red piece. So again, I've got an offcut of red that isn't going to go through the machine, so let's just trim the edge off slightly there. Again, don't forget the measurements for all of these. If you don't have the stitch dies are on the bottom, sorry, in the text of the YouTube video. Feed that one through. So this is also for the next card, not for this card, but whilst I've got the die cut machine out, I'm going to do it all in one go. And then I'm going to keep the bit that we just did, and I'm going to overlay the heart as central as possible. Line them all up. And feed that one through, and I'm going to keep that, again, put that to one side for my card later. That's all the die cuts we're doing today. Let's pop that away. Straighten up my work surface again. And let's start bringing all this lot back in over here. Right, so our next piece that we need is our outside, sorry, to stamp our lovely little robot. And for that I'm going to use the new nuts and bolts cling set that we've got. I'm going to stamp him in black, and I'm going to stamp him up towards the top because I'm going to put a little bit of ribbon in the bottom. Whilst I've got the ink pad out, I'm also going to stamp the text, which is the nuts and bolts about you, which is that one. I'm going to stamp that on a scrap piece of white paper because we're going to cut that piece out. that away for the minute. Now, depending on what colour you can colour in, I've coloured in my little robot here, and then I've used some of the Stampin' Blends pens. I'll show you how they work to colour this one in. You could watercolour him. You can make him whatever colour you want. I've picked out soft, which one did I use in the end? Yeah, smoky slate. And they come in, the sets come in two different, so one colourway comes with a light and a dark. So this one is dark red and light red. So I'm going to start with the lightest colour to colour in the robot. And it comes with a two-tipped, so you've got the soft brush type or the pen type, which is quite hard. I like the soft one, but just go very lightly. And it's an alcohol blend pen, so what it means is you won't see, it all blends in quite nicely, and there's no lines that you sometimes get if you colour in with the normal Stampin' Up white markers. It just depends on the type of look that you're after. I know I want to clean like a metal shiny thing, so I don't want any lines in it that shouldn't be there or wouldn't normally be there. But another nice way of doing it is by watercolouring them in, because you can add definition. So I've coloured in one layer just using the light one. It's all down to personal taste. Some people like to put the dark one on first, but then I just use the dark one to try and give him a little bit more definition in terms of where he might be dark, for make him shading and things like that, and shiny bits. And I think his mouth might need a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to colour in the heart. I'm going to go the same principle as I did with the last one. So it's the lighter colour first for the heart. And then I'm just going to go around the edge with the nib side just to give it a little bit of definition. And then what this one does, this is white pen. It's a colour lifter, so it lifts some of the colour out to make it go white. So I've just taken a little bit where I thought it might be a bit shiny there, the heart, give it a little bit of oomph. And then I put two little blobs on his cheeks, because I think she does need to have rosy cheeks. So that's him coloured in. The one thing I will say with Blends pens is to note that it does go through on the other side. So you wouldn't normally do this straight, use Blends on a normal card without layering, because otherwise you'd be able to see it on the inside. So that's our robot all coloured in. Let's put those to one side. Now I'm nuts and bolts about you. I'm just going to get some scissors and I'm going to fussy cut around this one. Doesn't need to be too neat. We're talking robots here. I try and keep it straight lines, because then it's easier when it comes to cutting out the layer underneath as well. But again, if you wanted to round off your corners, you could. Let's finish that bit out. So that's my nuts and bolts about you. And then my last off-cut piece of black that we had, I'm just going to pop that and stick that down on top. Stuck it in the corner so it gives me, I've already got the size that I want in terms of the edging there. So I'll leave that to be my guide. So I'll cut around and again, cut off the bulk of it because it makes it easier to cut around. Alternatively, you could stamp this onto, use embossing powders and emboss it in white straight onto black. I like the contrast this way. Okay, so that's my nuts and bolts bit cut out. So let's start putting our card together. Put them over to one side. So we have our base card. Now don't forget to get your bone folder in to make sure that it stays nice and, or it stands nice and proud. Then the first thing we're going to do is line up our piece of DSP somewhere about the top third of the card. And pop that down with some glue. If you wanted to use tape, you could. As I said before, I like using the wet glue because it means I can move it if it's not quite straight. And I like to use my grid paper underneath so that I know that I'm going from one line to the next across there. So I use my dashed lines to line up. Sometimes I use eye level, but I like to do it that way. Then now, counterintuitive, we're going to pop the black piece on at an angle. Normally my cards are all very symmetrical. I like to make them all very symmetrical. So just a bit of glue and pop it wonky. Then I'm going to actually 3D mount this one to make him look a little bit higher up. Using my 3D foam pads. And I'm going to pop him sort of straight and centered. Okay. Then again, we'll 3D mount our word in. Pop him quite crooked too. And the final bit there, because he looks a bit naked, we'll put some nice ribbon on. This is the new linen look ribbon that we've got here. It's going to be quite a floppy ribbon, a floppy bow. So I'll do my usual pulling it off the spool and do bunny ears, one over the top, pull the top one through the hoop or the loop underneath, and then just cut that one off. And then with a glue dot, I'm going to stick that on top, just like that. So that's our outside done. Let's not forget the inside. Let's open him up. Just pop the plain piece of white card on the inside. Just realised I haven't cut it to 8 inches square, so I'm going to actually cut the bottom bit off to make it so that it's all symmetrical on the inside. Do you see what I've done there? So I didn't start with an 8 by 8 piece, did I? There we go. Okay, and then we'll just pop our little hearts in. So it's going to have to go that way and that way, because if we did it that way, the hearts are the wrong way round. And there we have finished the first little card. Oh no, last thing, I've got some of these Eden Garden gems that I think the small ones are really good for the antennas, because they seem to pick up every colour in the rainbow. So I'm just pop that one on the end of his antenna. You see? So there is our first card. Right, so let's pop that over there and let's move on to the second card, which was the small one using the leftover piece of red that we had from the last one. So we're going to concentrate on this one now. So the measurements that we have for our offcut piece of red, this is the bottom of the A4 piece of red that we had. This should be 3 3/4 by 7 3/8. So we need to score it at 3 3/4. So we get our board again. Just going to double check that I've got my measurements right. So it's 3 3/4. So what I tend to do is I'll score it at 3 3/4. Then I'll fold it in half and then cut off that last bit of strip that's there. We're turning it over. And that's the base of our card. We then need some designer series paper that is 3 by 3/8. So I'm looking at these little ones here now. 1, 2, 3. Is that right? 1, 2, 3, that one there. It's just under the 3.5 mark. I then need some scrap of white card. That might be big enough for the squirrel. So that's our bottom layer. We've got our white layer that we made earlier, our red layer that we cut out. Oh, let's bring it down a bit. I just think it might be slightly off shot. And let's get our Nuts About You. You could also use the Nuts About You thing from there. You could use another robot if you wanted and cut him out. I quite like my squirrels. What I tend to do is I tend to do batches of them and then cut them out afterwards. So, but I'll just go through the process now. So I need this one. Just take him off. Really fit, because I'm going to cut him out. I can fit him on any small piece of card. It doesn't really matter. Black ink. There we are. And then we're going to need to infill him. Now what I do find is, let me just clear this one off. Is that you'll see my squirrels that I've pre-done. Some of them are quite dark and some of them are quite light. Now this one has been printed first using the shadow without printing it first or stamping it first, and this one has been then done with what's called the ghosting image. So I've printed that one first and then I've filled it in again a second time. So you pick which one you prefer. I think I quite like the lighter one because I think the dark one's too dark on that card. So I've used here Night of Misty Moonlight stamp pad. And I'm going to stamp him off on another scrap piece of paper first, and then I'm going to do the image. Line him up. Excuse the top of my head, if you can see the top of my head. Let's put that one there. Now, there's a little bit of a miss in there on his tail because I didn't quite get it right. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to lift some of the colour. See how I've squeezed the ink pad there and it's come off there. I'm going to get one of my pens, water pens, and just pick up a little colour from the lid and colour in the missing bit. Okay. And actually at the same time, whilst I'm doing this, it sort of gives it a little bit more 3Dism, if that's the word. Oops, pop that one away. And then we're going to cut him out. Save time. Here's one I've prepared earlier. Okay, so, oh, then the next thing we need is the wording nuts about you. Now, the best way to do this is to mount the card first in the right place so it's centered, so you know that your text is in the right place. Because what you could do is you could stamp it on the card first, and it might not be in the right place when you come to put the wording on. So I'm going to line it up as best I can. Then I'm going to take nuts about you. So I need a little one. Night of navy. No, it's not night of navy, it's nuts about you. Pop that in the middle. And then finish building the card. Oh, I forgot about the white bit in the middle, didn't I, on the inside? Again, because they're using that nice DSP, you could put that one on the back, either side, either way you want. There's that one. The other thing you could do, if you don't have the heart die cut for there, you could print out or punch out a white heart and stick that on top of the red bit. So for example, imagine that was white, that would be on top, and do it that way if you had a punch rather than a die cut. Okay, let's then mount him as well. So I want the squirrel, so think about where I'm going to pop the foam pads on the bottom rather than, otherwise it's going to lift it too much, because I want it to sort of be stuck on there. And then one down. Where am I putting him? One down here by his feet. And that should, let's make sure that he's not just, so he's just on the edge. Make sure he's not sticking over the edge, otherwise you won't get it in the card, in the envelope even. And there we have that one. But what we do need is the inside piece, which is 3.5 by 3.5. Check it's the right size. Yep. And if you wanted to add another little bit inside, I haven't put it on this one, but we've got the little hearts that are there. So again, finish that one off. Let's put some inside here as well. There we go. If you look then at the two insides that I've just done, you'll see the difference. So that was the first inked one, and that was not without re-inking, and that's what it comes out, slightly lighter. So there you have your two cards using one piece of A4 paper. For Valentine's, you could have one to give, one to put on a little parcel. Hope you've enjoyed making those with me today. Any questions, then ask me in the comments or email me. Have fun. Take care. Bye.